Hey, you guys and gals, thank you so much for coming. My name is Bear, and this is the Odinic School of Mysteries. You found us at last. Well, that is assuming you haven't already found us. If you're new to us, thanks for coming. Um, so, to get started right off the bat, there is a few things um, that I felt like we needed to talk about real quick. I guess you could call it a disclaimer. It's not really a disclaimer. Uh, it's just something I think that is worth bearing in mind. As many of you have already known, and if you're brand new to this channel, you're finding this out for the first time. I'm a part of the reason I do this is because I'm a part of a mystery school, a Norse mystery school, and a lot of people didn't even know that the Norse even had their own school of mysteries. We do. But that comes with some caveats and some things that are worth bearing in mind. We are not what some would say reconstructionists. And what do I mean by a reconstructionist? A reconstructionist is someone who tries to dig through the historical record and try and re-establish an ancient religion. In trying to rebuild it as it was when it was popular. There's for instance, there's a really huge movement right now in Egypt. Well, I shouldn't even say, maybe not even Egypt, but it's called Commissionism, or from the word. Let me try that again. The Commissions are the original word for Egypt. That's what the Egyptians called themselves. And so the Commission religion is the religion of Chem. Chem is also where we get the word chemistry from, for those of you who are interested in such a thing. It means black, like the black soil of the Nile. This is where that comes from. So there's a huge movement right now to reestablish and to reconstruct the old Commission religion and bring it back. We're not like that. We're not reconstructionists, nor are we. See if I can do it without stuttering. Literalists. There we go. I have a stutter sometimes. I'm sure you've noticed that before. Literalists. As in, we don't believe things in a literal way. And I'm sure you've picked up on that if you followed me for some time. There are things that are known to the mystery school that isn't, how shall we say, you wouldn't be able to go into the documents we have and be able to point to it and say that is provable. Like a really good example of this is the goddess Sif, Thor's wife. We believe, and it's understood in our organization to be the moon, the goddess of the moon. However, if you came to me and you said, Bear, I want you to prove to me where it says that in the historical record or in any of the documents, sagas, or anything that we have, I couldn't do it because it doesn't exist. Sif in the sagas is only really known for being the wife of Thor, and beyond that, there really isn't much more to say about her. She's very passive in the stories that we have. But in the mysteries, she's known to be the moon. Her hair, her beautiful hair, every month gets cut off by the primordial chaos, and then is restored to her later on. So we see it as a symbol of the moon, and that is just what it is, right? So I need you to kind of keep that in mind as we go forward here. There's, because I don't want to mislead you in any way. I want you to know what you're getting yourselves into. We see the mysteries, the Norse mysteries, as a doorway to wisdom and to an ancient understanding of the way the world works. And so we come to it from a very different point of view than, let's say, like one of my favorite Norse scholars right now is a guy by the name of Dr. Jackson Crawford. And if you follow if you follow Norse stuff at all on YouTube, you'd probably already aware of him. He's kind of a cool dude. He's a cowboy. He lives in Colorado on a ranch and talks about Vikings. And it's it's cool because he's absolutely not the kind of person you would think would be into this kind of stuff, but he is. Anyway, someone like him, for example, we're not someone like him, where we take everything as it is written and reports on it. So there's that's just important to keep in mind, I think, as we go forward. Because like I said, I don't want to mislead anyone. I don't want to trick you into thinking you're getting something that you're not. I want to be very upfront and honest with you about where I come from and how I'm looking at these stories. The Hanged Man is one of the very most important aspects of the Norse, or more specifically, the Odinic mysteries. The Odinic meaning the mysteries of Odin. Every mystery school under the sun, all of them, Masons included, have a dying god myth. They all do. Every single one of them. Christians have one, obviously. Mithra has one. The Eleusinian mysteries, the mysteries of Lucius have one. All of them have dying god myths. There's a whole mystery school surrounding Ishtar and her journey to the Underworld and back. So, it's really important to keep this in mind. The Hanged Man, the symbol of the Hanged Man, is the most important aspect of what we do in the Odinic school, in the mysteries of Odin and the way we look at the universe. Because we see his dying god myth as a template for the profundity of the universe. And the symbolism gets pretty thick in a hurry. And it's going to be impossible to get through it all in one video, unfortunately. I've already talked about this to some degree in a couple of other videos. To some of you who've been here with me from the beginning or have watched some of my earlier videos, this will be review in a lot of ways, and it'll be new information in a lot of ways too. So I thought it was important to kind of get started here and then go back over this to get us back on track. So, the dying god myth of Odin comes to us from the poem The Havamal. And I'm going to read a few stanzas, and then we're going to break it down. There's actually 3 stanzas that, well, they're all important, right? They're all very heavily laced with symbolism. However, for the sake of time, we're going to only deal with 3 of them. Let me go back down here. So I'm reading right now from the Olive Bray translation of the Havamal, and it goes like this. I trow I hung on that windy tree 9 whole days and nights, stabbed with a spear offered to Odin, myself to mine own self given. High on that tree of which none hath heard, from what roots it rises to heaven. None refreshed me with food or drink. I peered right down in the deep. Crying aloud, I lifted the runes. Then back I fell from thence. And then we're going to skip a few stanzas here. And we're going to jump down. He's talking about the different things he can do with the runes. And so there's, he's laying out the spells, and this is the 12th spell. A 12th I know. If I see in a tree a corpse from a halter hanging, such spells I write and paint in runes, that the being descends and speaks. A 12th I know. If I see in a tree a corpse from a halter hanging, such spells I write and paint in runes, that the being descends and speaks. So, the abridged bear version of that story. Odin hangs. He dies on the World Tree. What's called the Old Odin. The Christians would probably know it. There's a thing in Paul where Paul talks about the old man who has to die for the new man to take over after, he's saved by Jesus or whatever. Kind of in a similar vein. The old Odin, who is in ignorance, suffers on the World Tree. And he suffers there. He's in pain. He's pierced by his own spear. And now it needs to be understood right off the bat that spears in ancient symbolism are almost always symbols for mind. For the mind. More specifically, they're symbolizing not only the mind, but the effectual change that a good mind can have on the world. Spears mean change. Right? That's why a sword is such an important symbol in war propaganda. And you see all these people holding a sword up to heaven. It means I am forcing change upon the world. And the similar vein kind of comes along with the spear. So his wisdom, he's pierced by his own wisdom. It's not able to shine forth. Effectual change is impossible. And he hangs there for 9 days. And 9 is a very sacred number in the mysteries of Odin. And one of these days, I will go into all the reasons why that is. But for now, we don't have time. But take my word for it for now. It's a very sacred number. For 9 days and 9 nights, he suffers there and hangs. No one gives him food. No one gives him anything to drink. Food and drink are also symbols for life-giving sustenance, wisdom, and that sort of thing. His life is being drained out of him while he hangs there. Until on the 9th day, in a fit of pain and ecstasy and suffering, he looks down to the waters of Erd and sees the runes there. The runes are written by, there's these things called the Norns. They're very similar to the Greek fates, and they write the runes on the World Tree, on the roots of the World Tree, and then they go up the tree and affect man and beasts and gods alike. So he looks down in the waters of Erd, he sees the runes, and not only does he see them, he understands them. And upon seeing the runes, the word rune, it is important to understand, literally means wisdom. That's like the literal translation. Rune means wisdom. Upon seeing the wisdom in the waters, he is suddenly released. His spear is removed, his noose breaks, and he falls from the tree screaming. And what is interesting about all this, about the second part, the 12th spell that he knows. And in some translations, it even says that he raises these from the dead, where if he comes upon a hanged man, he can write runes upon him and make him come alive. And I could say, from personal experience, this has happened to me. Not in a literal way, of course. I've never actually hung from a tree. But one of the main, I can't get into any real detail because it's sacred and it's private. But one of the main initiation rites in the Odinic mysteries is a hanged man ritual, where you put your head through a noose. And I have done that. And so this is that last stanza where you write the runes upon somebody, and you ritualistically recreate that scene of the dying god myth of Odin. Is the suffering from the tree, the pierced by the spear, and upon seeing the runes and the revelations of the realities that surround us, you are released from that, and you're no longer bound by your ignorance anymore. You're set free, and so then that's where we get into the 9 steps of Odin. We've talked about that before. I did a 2-part video on that, and we'll probably go over it again at some point. But then Odin ritualistically, so you can see it like this. So, and I've described it this way before, that the Masons have a 33-degree system, and there's a lot of reasons for that. There's 33 vertebrae in your spine. It takes the sun 33 degrees to get from the end of one processional stage to the beginning of another. Or is it the end of one to the end of the other? I don't remember. Something like that. There's a lot of symbolism in there. There's a lot of reasons why 33 is their number. We don't have 33 degrees. We have 9 degrees. 9, again, is a very sacred number to us. And so upon that first initiation rite, that first time when you put your head through the noose and you're initiated into the mysteries of Odin, there's 9 steps that you take to get to the top. And or rather, there's actually 9 steps you take to called the gates of Asgard, or the gates of the heavens. And that's when the person reaches what's called their first estate. They kind of regain all that sacred knowledge that they have lost. And that's what ritualistically we celebrate with Odin. Odin takes his 9 steps up the world tree. And so there's 6 rites and there's 3 gates. So that makes 9 total. And so you go through 2 rites and you hit a gate. Then you have to unlock the gate. And the gate has a key, and without the key you can't progress. All I'm really allowed to teach you guys is the first 3 steps, basically. Because at that point you're considered alive and you're considered free. You're not considered alive until you've passed the gates of the Underworld. And I'll put a little thing in here somewhere so that you could see what I'm talking about. You're not considered alive until you pass those 3 steps, and then move on to the next section. Not everyone needs to move on to the next section. Some people are perfectly fine with the first 3, but yeah. So there are, and I included it in the graph, which I admit might be a little confusing for people, because there's 12 stages on the graph, on the world tree graph. And the reason for that is because after number 9, after that last rite, it's called the hidden rites after that, or the temple rites, which are not discussed to anyone who's already made it, except for someone who's already made it, which is why they're called the secret rites or the hidden rites. And the Masons have a very similar thing going on where you reach. So the way to think about it is this, and then we're going to go back and start dealing with the symbolism, is in karate, they say that after you reach your black belt, you finally get to start learning karate. Because you've gotten all the nonsense taken care of. You've done all the work at the bottom. You've done all that shit you need to do in order to get that all taken care of. And then, finally, you can learn karate. And the same principle works here. There is no such thing as arriving. There's a such thing as beginning. And upon reaching number 9, the 9th step is considered the beginning. And so then you finally get to really learn the mysteries. And it takes years and years and years and years and years to get there. So, really, the only people who really get there are the ones who really want it. And they really want it. So that's just kind of the way it is. So we are going to start dealing with some of the symbolism here. We have already discussed in a video about the Spear of Gungnir, so I'm not going to dig into it very much today. Forgot to wipe this down. But we are going to start talking a little bit about the Noose. And the Hanged Man. All right. My whiteboard. Okay, friends. There's a reason why mystery schools seem macabre from the outset. From the outside looking in, they all seem very dark and awful because there's always implements of death associated with it. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret if you haven't already heard me say this before. The very first Arcanum of the Odinic School of Mysteries. An Arcanum, for those who don't know. We'll start with that. An Arcanum is defined as something that must be known first before all other things can be known and understood in their appropriate contexts. And I'm going to say that again because it's important. An Arcanum is something that must be known first before all other things can be known and understood in their appropriate contexts. This is important to keep in mind. There is nothing in the mysteries, and I don't care which mystery school you talk about, because this is the first Arcanum in every single one of them. Every single one of them. This is the secret of all secrets. This is the thing that everyone is trying to keep from you, right? You always want to know what the Illuminati are hiding. This is it. This is the secret. This is the thing that is never talked about and is only understood by the initiated. And I mean that. And I'm not trying to build this up for effect. I'm trying to tell you this so you understand it and you get it through your head, because this isn't something to mess around with. And it's a very this isn't a figurative truth. This isn't some philosophical idea. This is a literal truth. Okay? And that truth, that Arcanum, is this. The world you stand on is the underworld. This is the fallen world. This is the place where everything is counterfeit. Everything is a copy that is trying to imitate something on a higher, that exists on a higher plane. Sex that we enjoy in a physical body is a counterfeit to the spiritual thing. Currency, as we know it, is a counterfeit. As we know it, is a counterfeit. Everything here is the underworld. Everything here is a false place. Right? This is the land of the dead. And it's important that you understand that and you get it through your head. Right? This isn't, again, this isn't a fun philosophical thought. This is as close to a reality as I can explain it. Okay. This plane that we're in is the bottom rung. It's the underworld. Which is why death symbols are so prevalent in mystery school philosophies. That's why Jesus dies on a cross and then bids his followers to also pick up their cross and follow him. That's why Odin dies on a tree. That's why Prometheus dies on a tree. That's why Osiris was murdered. That's why Horus was murdered. That's why Balder was murdered. That's why Quetzalcoatl was murdered. That's why in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, he says that he's always going to go back down to the halls of Amente. This is it. This is the halls of Amente. If you're a heathen, and it's funny to me because I've actually started this channel for the heathen community. And it seems like I talk more to people with Christian backgrounds than heathen backgrounds. But I don't care. That's just not what I expected. Anyway, in the heathen community, the idea of getting to Valhalla, or Valhall, as it's the correct translation, I suppose, is really important. That's kind of like the heathen heaven. Everyone wants to get to Valhalla because it sounds sexy or whatever. And the word Valhall, or Valhalla, literally translates to weapon dead, or those who were murdered by weapons. If you're here, chances are you're probably not in Valhalla. Right? This is the place where the dead come. And in Norse belief, there is, everybody goes to hell. Everybody does. But the thing with almost all ancient societies, and this is the thing to keep in mind, is that the idea of death isn't a permanent state. Time is cyclical. Everyone must die and everyone must ascend. That's just part of it. Odin himself does. The belief in the mystery school. Again, this is a mystery school. This is not If you're going to try and go and find this in any of the literature, you're not going to find it. But this is something that is understood here in this particular school that I'm a part of. That the very reason that Odin himself ended up dead on the world tree is because that is actually takes place after Ragnarok, when he was murdered and eaten by the wolf. That's how he ended up on the world tree. Part of the consequence of dying, part of the way we end up getting here, is developing amnesia. We forget everything about ourselves. We forget who we are, where we come from, and what we're here to do. It's kind of a rough thing. But part of the thing that the mystery schools do in the higher degrees is to remember who you are. It's to remember who you are. And to regain that first estate, that part of you that was missing. And so that is where we kind of come back to the dying god myth. And the suffering and dying in the underworld. So, the noose is a rather important symbol. And the Masons also have a noose, believe it or not, which is kind of interesting. The Masons borrowed from a lot of folks, you guys. They're not... That's pretty good coffee. They're kind of... they're very handsy with other people's things, I guess you could say. The Masons have a mix of Egyptian, Norse, Christian, Jewish belief. They're a mishmash of a bunch of things. But they don't really call it a noose. They call it a tow line. I'll put a picture of it up here for you so you can see it. But the symbol of the noose is rather important. So let's hold up my little thing here. So you have kind of this rope that kind of comes down like this. And then you have the noose. So the noose symbolizes a couple of things at once. It represents time. It's a pretty major one. Because, okay. We're going to go through this very quick. All right, because we don't have a lot of time. We're already at 33 minutes as of this recording. It's probably not quite what it is at the finished product, but I'm going to go through this very quick because of time. But we'll do the best we can. Okay, so when you're a child, time is only now. It's just a dot. It's just this. It's just whatever is happening right now. That is what time is, right? That's why things seem to take forever, is because you only live now. But then you get older. Your consciousness gets a little bit bigger, and you realize that you time appears to be a point A to point B experience. Right? I'm born, I die. I'm born, I die. Right? But, and this is kind of where most people land. Really, in life. They don't really kind of get beyond here. But one of the things that the ancients know is that time is cyclical. This is where we kind of get the idea of the Ouroboros from. It's the snake, that eats his own tail. Right? It's right here. It's a snake that eats its own tail. It becomes a circle. Right? Always see the end from the beginning. You've heard me say this before. The time is cyclical. It's a circle. It keeps repeating itself. But you follow things along, you realize that, no, you're always ascending. Or you're descending. Right? So it's not even really just a circle anymore. It's a spiral. And so when you're looking at this, right, when you're looking at the Ouroboros from the top, really you're looking down through the spiral, going down or up, right? If you look at it straight on, it looks like a circle, right? But wait, time cycles repeat themselves. So this isn't really a circle anymore, or a spiral. Now it's a spiral that connects itself like this. And so if you actually look at this from a different direction, you'd see that it's actually a torus shape field here. And this is where the world tree comes in. Sorry, I think my marker's running out of juice. So I hope you can see that. And I'll put it up here too. You'll see that it's a torus, right? With these bands that circle it like this. And now you zoom out, right? You zoom out, and now we're back to a dot again. We're back to a dot. This is the torus now. And it's not even just one torus, it's a string of toruses. And it's not just a string of toruses, it's a string, toruses are all connected in a circle. But wait, they're not connected in a circle. Those circles, those toruses are a spiral that go like this, that turn back into a spiral again. And wait, those toruses aren't just a spiral anymore, all chained together. Now they're all connected. See, it becomes a fractal. It's a fractal. Each thing begets the other. So the noose represents this phenomenon. It's a very simplistic symbol for time. In its most basic sense. So if you go back to the spiral, you see how these two things are kind of similar. Man, I gotta get a different marker. I don't really want to stop. I'll just, if it's okay with you, I'll make do. I will grab because I don't like this, when I'm on a roll, I don't really want to stop very badly. So I'm going to get this out. And we'll just use a legal pad, if you don't mind. And you're not, as of this recording, you're not here to argue, so I guess that just is what it is. Okay. So we got our noose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it's interesting, nooses are always have 9 knots in them. Did you know that? All right, there's our noose. We have our 9 knots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Our 9 knotted noose. Time and time. And then there's a secondary symbolic thing that has to do with the noose. And that is man is being dangled from heaven by a thread. So we have here our world tree. Try to make it thick so you can see it. We have our world tree. This is the official, this is an actual rune for the world tree, by the way. And you'll notice that the logo down here at the bottom kind of looks like this. This is a Taurus. This is a Taurus, like we talked about a minute ago. Kind of looks like this. If you ever seen a magnetic field, it kind of looks like this. There's the magnet here. And then energy kind of goes out. Then comes back into the bottom. All this is on purpose, you guys. And then the energy goes up from the bottom and out the top. This is a positive polarity. This is a negative polarity. Okay? Clear as mud? Excellent. All right. So, you're hanged from heaven by a thread. Right here. You're hung from heaven by a thread. This means, symbolically speaking, you're not really disconnected from who you really are. You're not truly disconnected from who you are. You're connected to your higher self, the real you, but you're lowered, so to speak, into the underworld. And so part of the suffering that we endure while we're here is due to the fact we're a spiritual being of a higher nature that is being subject to phenomenon of a lower nature. That the things that we're enduring here are contrary to the true nature of who we are and what we do and in the environment in which we're meant to thrive. And so, like they say, the first step into solving any problem is to recognizing that there is one. The first step into knowing answering the question of why do we suffer? Why are we having such a hard time? Why is it that when we try and do the things that the underworld says we should do, when we try and behave in the ways that the underworld likes to have us behave, we don't really find any joy in it. In fact, we get worse. The more money we acquire, the worse we feel. The more sex we get, the more lonelier we become. We are taught to believe that the more sex you have and the more money you have and the more sexual partners you have and the more deviant of a lifestyle you have and the fancier food you get to have and all the cigars in the world you can smoke, we're taught that those things are supposed to make us happy. But yet, the more times we do all that, the more times we give in to that system, the worse and worse it becomes. The worse our situation becomes. And it's because we're a divine being. And this is the part that it will probably get me into trouble. And I'm prepared for that. But sometimes you gotta say the truth. In the original Greek, Jesus doesn't say, I am the Son of God. He says, I am a Son of God. And even in a modern translation, in the way that it's classically said, he says, I'm just the first of many brethren. He's the first brother of a large family. The Christ's death on the cross, for example, his death on the cross, right? He's hung from his tree. Is how he gets to the Underworld. Christ dies. He goes to the Underworld and starts his mystery, his ministry. Christ dies. He goes to the Underworld. He sets the captives free. He breaks the chains of death, and then ascends into the clouds, promising that someday, going back here to our Taurus, I will come back the same way I left. He'll come back the same way he left. The great secret of all these dying god myths, you guys, is that you are the principal character. It's not some externalized thing that happened to some god somewhere out there. It happens to you. You are Odin. You are Odin. And you are hung from the world tree and pierced by your own spear. By your own ignorance, you suffer. By your own ignorance, you suffer and die. There is a very common thing that happened in Norse culture where they would throw a spear over an army. And you declare that all of you are given to Odin. And it's not it's said that the dead are given to Odin. And so we think, oh, okay, this is just a sacrificial thing. We're going to give these things to Odin. No, it is actually much more esoteric than that. It is much graver of an insult. Basically, what you're saying is to these people, by your ignorance, you suffer and die on this field. Is what it's saying. It's a once you really, so let me put it this way. When I was first joined the mysteries, actually this is even before I joined the mysteries, this is when I was first introduced to my teacher. One of the first things he asked me is he said, can you entertain an idea without accepting it? Can you entertain an idea without accepting it, even if it's hateful to you? Can you weigh the merits of every argument, anything that's proposed? Ponder it without accepting it into yourself. The thing I'm asking you to do is that very thing. Is pretend for a minute that what I'm saying is a literal truth. And I'm not asking you to believe it as a literal truth, but I'm saying let's just pretend for a second that what I'm saying is a literal truth. Then observe the world around you and see if I'm not right. If the things we experience here, the things that we undergo, the trials we're forced to undertake, the lessons we have to learn, the suffering, the death, the pain and the sorrow and all of this stuff isn't a result of being in the underworld. And upon knowing that, once you actually get to know it, then because you know your own situation, you could set about the work of setting yourself free. And that's the hard part. And it's the easy part. Because once you understand the nature of what's happening, you have a known quandary now. It's no longer some mystery why bad shit keeps happening to you. You know why bad shit keeps happening to you. It's a But once you have the known quandary, then you know what to fight. You know what you're fighting against. And then you can set about the work of figuring out how to get out. If that's something you want. A lot of the dark occult, the dark side of this whole scheme, they like being in the underworld. They like it. They kind of see themselves as being the top man in prison. So the kind of the question that is put forth to really anyone who really begins this work is, do you want to serve in heaven or do you want to rule in hell? And it's a lot more literal than I think than is often it is given credit for. That question, do you want to rule in hell or do you want to serve in heaven? And so they're not really particularly afraid of karmic consequences because they don't really plan on leaving, which is why Jeffrey Epstein could have a temple to Baal or Moloch on his land, on his island, and sacrifice children, because he doesn't really expect to leave. He expects to come back. Whether or not it works out quite that way, I don't know. Of course, we're all giving this our best guess. I'm not going to tell you lies and say I know any of this for sure. But this is the way the doctrine of the esoteric works. This is, without knowing this, nothing else can be known. You'll never understand the Masonic philosophy. You'll never understand the Rosicrucians. You won't understand the Norse secrets. You won't understand the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Funerary texts are routinely mystery school documents. Egyptian Book of the Dead is exactly the same thing. Coffin texts, it's all exactly the same thing. It is. And it's really quite an ingenious way of keeping things secret, because everyone assumes that they're alive. We operate on that assumption. We say, well, I'm conscious, I'm looking around, I must be alive. Well, that is a pretty big assumption, isn't it? This is called a blind. I've talked about blinds before. It's a very specific mystery school device that's used to keep secrets. The way a blind works, for those who don't know, is it's when you put an over amount of emphasis on certain information to encourage someone to come to a wrong conclusion. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a lie, but it is profoundly misleading. Right? A lot of what we deal with is blinds. And it's just assumed. Right? There's a lot of things we assume. We assume that the end of the story of Jesus is really just the end of the story of Jesus, and not like his death and resurrection, for example. We assume that's the end of the story rather than the middle or the end. Or the beginning. So like he dies on the cross, he goes to the underworld, he starts his ministry, and then on the third day, the third degree, he is resurrected. Just like on the third step of Odin, after you pass the gates of the underworld, you resurrect. Jesus was 33 when he died. 33 degrees in the Masonic tradition. There's just a lot of numbers in there, you guys, and they're all important. And you can't understand any of them unless you understand this first. I know I've been talking for a while, and I appreciate you being willing to stick with me and listen to me ramble. But, this stuff, it can't be it can't be shortened up. YouTube really likes 10-minute or less videos. I mean, really, people only will listen to you talk for about 6 minutes, and that's about it before their patience runs out. This shit cannot be broken up into small segments. It just can't. And that the format that I'm supposed to use doesn't lend itself to that anyway. I'm not... the mysteries, as I have said, have always been taught orally, and this is the only, and rather the best way I can do that. The only better way is to actually have you sitting in front of me and talking, and having us talk like people, rather than me just monologue to a camera. That's that. But the symbol of the noose is pretty heavy duty. And so there's a lot of things going on in that. You have the numbers. Okay. So, we didn't get into the second part. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to... You know what? Screw it. You know what? I'm just going to keep talking. All right? If you really want to know this stuff, then keep listening. And you can just truck along with me. All right? If you cut out early, then I guess that's on you. So really what we covered was the first part of that, right? The first 2 stanzas. Odin hangs from the world tree. He suffers from the world tree. He receives the wisdom, and upon seeing wisdom, he is set free. His cord is cut. He's no longer dangled into the underworld anymore. He's set free. His spear, his own spear, is removed from him, and now he can begin the work of traveling back to Asgard, which is the top roots, the top section of the world tree. And right, here's our world tree. Again, this is an actual rune. This isn't just made up for our benefit. So we got the first 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. This is the Underworld. 4, 5, 6. This is Midgard right here. This is the waters. Underworld. All right. I'll show this to you up close so you can see it. Bifrost. 6, 9. And then you have the hidden rites. 10, 11, 12. Okay. All right. Again, I'm going to put the really nice, beautiful chart that was, that Mark Van Weird graciously made for us. Check him out. Weird Works. He's a master craftsman. So check him out. Anyway, he made this beautiful chart for us. Anyway, but, and I'll put it down here because I'm a nice guy like that. Crap. No, I just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so our world tree. Oh, that's right. Asgard is up here. Is this top bit. Up here at the very top. It's the land of the gods. And number 9 is the gate that gets you into that place. And so when Odin dies, he falls and he climbs again. So now, that's a recap of the first hour. I don't know how long this is going to go, but I'm looking at my timestamp here, and it's been exactly an hour. So we'll just say that was the synopsis of the first hour. All right. The second part. I've covered the Noose. It says that the 12th rune, the 12th spell that Odin knows, is that he can, should he find a hanged person who's dangling from a tree, in much the same manner he himself had fallen, he could write runes upon him and make him come alive. He could bring him back from the dead. This person, he or she. It's not gender specific. Understand? What is the rune? What do the runes mean again? Do you remember? Do you remember what the word rune means? It's wisdom. In esoteric philosophy, anything that causes your eyes to close, death, blindness, sleep, all of those things, darkness in general, walking around at night. Like if you remember, if you're a Bible fan, for you Christians out there, the road to Emmaus, they're walking through the darkness with their lamps, right? Those symbols are all really important because they all symbolize ignorance, the lack of knowing. There's a key and a precept known in our mystery school, at least, says, I know, therefore I see, and I see, therefore I live. In order to see, you can't be in darkness, because if it's dark, you can't see, right? So you have to have something that opens your eyes, that removes that veil of darkness from you, so that you could see the world around you. You don't run into things. Darkness is a dangerous place. There's wild animals out there. There's tree limbs. There's potholes. There's things you could fall off a cliff and, not see it coming. There's things that you suffer in the darkness, right? You get hurt. It's really stressful. And so the light that comes back in the morning, the son of the morning, as Jesus calls himself, and all the wisdom gods are called the sons of the morning, are the things that bring light back into the earth, so you can see where you're going again. And that's what wisdom represents. That's what the runes represent. So when Odin comes across a dead person, and should he want to raise him, he writes runes upon him. He writes what? Wisdom upon him. And wisdom is the light of the world. Wisdom is the things that opens the eyes so that a person can see where they're going. It takes a person from a state of being a victim of their own ignorance and their own circumstances. They're so ignorant that they don't even know that they're ignorant. They're so dumb that they don't even know that they're dumb. They're so dumb that they think they're smart, right? They're so ignorant that they think they know everything. Where the wise is always a student. The wise knows that they don't know everything. And so Odin comes to him, and this person who's hanging from the world tree and is suffering and dying in the underworld, he writes the runes upon him and sets him free. It is also worth noting in the symbol of a tree in general is almost universally used as a symbol for mankind. Is almost ubiquitous in almost every circumstance as a symbol for the person. There's even some sects of the Gnostics who believed that the human soul was literally a tree, a literal tree. So it's, I don't know. I mean, the symbolism gets really thick here. Like, you're hung from a tree, right? You're interred in a body. Your spirit is hung from a person, is hung from, this thing. You're suffering in the underworld. You're hung from a tree. The symbolism gets really thick. But then, like I said, again and again and again, Odin comes and sets him free. One of the things that's really fun about the wisdom gods, and I'm a huge fan of the wisdom gods, is that they're all kind of precocious. So again, I'm probably going to get myself into trouble here, and this is why I hesitate to call myself Asatru, or heathen even, really, because we don't really, in the mystery school, we don't really hold very highly to dogma, right? And so we're not going to say Odin only kind of person. And so one of the things, again, probably get me into trouble, is that it's understood in at least our mystery school that Odin, Prometheus, Thoth, Osiris, Quetzalcoatl, probably even Jesus, and a number of those other ones are the same person, that they're the same entity. Shiva in India, and Brahma, it is highly suspected that they're all the same person. Like, we're not going to say a matter of fact that, yes, absolutely, they are, but they all seem to have very similar personality traits, and they all seem to have a very specific modus operandi, I guess you could say, or way of operating in the world. And that is kind of, they don't hold very closely to rules, and they very often break them to their own peril for the benefit of mankind. The person of Odin is like the proto-shaman, and in fanciful terms, they're called psychopomps. Psychopomp. A psychopomp is a spirit, is a very specific kind of spirit that could cross dimensions, basically a shaman. Where Odin rides his horse up and down the world tree. His horse is called Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse. And he travels up and down the world tree, and he's away from home a lot. And he almost interacts with the dead as much as he interacts with the living. He interacts with mankind almost as much as he interacts with the gods themselves. And so it is not unreasonable to suggest, especially with time being as convoluted as time is, as we just went over, that these different people that we bump into, who all have the same situation, usually end up murdered in one form or another, are here to help man and to help man grow, despite the archons, the rulers of the underworld, who would really rather mankind stay ignorant and enslaved. And Odin has kind of, along like with Jesus, is a really good example of that. Prometheus is another really good example of that, where they give fire or light to mankind and then end up getting murdered for the pleasure. Prometheus was hung from a mountain. Jesus was hung from a tree. Odin was hung from a tree. There's a lot of these recurring symbolisms over and over again. Quetzalcoatl was crucified. There's a lot of those similar beings that will come, give mankind wisdom, and then the archons, or the rulers of the underworld, promptly want to get rid of them. And I really kind of enjoy that aspect of them, because it's a paradox. And this is a really fun paradox for those of you who like paradoxes and like solving them, is that when you learn law, like actual universal law and how the laws of the universe that govern all beings work, the more anarchist you become. And it sounds really bizarre, because you really start to buck the system a lot more aggressively the more you get into it. Because you realize very quickly that the systems that are in place are bullshit. You realize that all of this is a counterfeit to the real thing. It's play acting. It's LARPing. When you read the Gnostic texts, Yaldabaoth, the king of the underworld, whose name his second name is Samael, which literally means God of the blind. You can't get much more of a underworld. You can't get much more symbolic for the underworld than that. But the God of the blind, he explains how he looks up through the heavens to above the waters, where waters here, the second rung, he looks up through the waters to the heavens and sees the way that the creator of all things orders his heavens and tries to mimic them. But because he's a god of ignorance, he's a god of the blind, all he can do is pretend. And so he tries to order his heavens, the underworld, the same way the heavens above are ordered. So the more and more you'll learn about the true order of the heavens and the way that the systems actually work and who the true authorities are, the less and less inclined you are to bother serving the powers that be down here in the dirt, in the underworld, the fallen place. It's good coffee. But what's kind of unique, and this is, I would say, the original Christianity was like this. This is I'm talking pre-Constantine, like the original root form of Christianity, the very Gnostic, I guess you could say, form of Christianity, was like this. Christianity in its modern form isn't like this, where the wisdom God, he does save you. But you have to do the work to get out. So I don't really want to pick on Christianity, but I grew up, I wouldn't say that I was a fundamentalist Christian, but I was pretty darn close to conservative fundamentalism as far as Christianity goes. Very, like, I remember not being able to go trick-or-treating because my parents thought that Halloween was evil. Just, very conservative. Couldn't watch the movie Casper or any of that stuff. So we only listen to Christian music, so I would say I was pretty fundamentalist. Any kind of sexual behavior outside of marriage was considered bad, including masturbation and that sort of thing. And in that form of Christianity, in that aggressive form of Christianity that I was a part of, Jesus saves you, and that's it. You say the prayer, you're going to heaven, right? He saved you from your sins. There's no longer any. You just go to church, you love God, and do what is necessary, and you're saved. The old way is that the wisdom God will come down, and he will save you. Right? Odin will write the runes upon you. He'll write wisdom upon you. But it is still on you to climb the world tree. And that's the big difference. That's the big difference between the mystery school systems and traditional religious belief. Is that, like I remember, like I still remember back to when I was still really heavily into the Christian, in the Christian circles. There's always this big debate in Christianity between, are you saved for life? Can you lose your salvation? Those are two big debates. Or are you saved through works? Was a really big one, or is it just you're one and done? You once saved, always saved. And what I found out was really fascinating with the mystery school systems is that both are true. Both are, you're given, it's almost like you're drowning, and Odin or the wisdom god will give you a kit to build a boat. Right? He's not just going to he's going to give you a way to get out, but you have to really want to live. And so it's kind of that same thing. He'll give you the tools. He'll open your eyes to be able to see what's really happening, but it's on you to get your way out. And that is a huge difference between the way the mystery schools see the dying god myth and what a traditional Christian doctrine would say about that. Salvation, ascension, and those things isn't something that is far away. Salvation isn't something that's going to happen to you later because of what you've done now. Salvation happens now, and you continue to work towards it. And that's kind of the thing. You say the prayer now, you accept Jesus into your heart, and then someday, far away, when you die, then you get to go to heaven, and then you get to be rewarded for it then. The mystery school system says you're saved now, and you work towards heaven now. And that's a very different way of looking at things. And it gives you, there's a lot more personal responsibility that is associated with that than there is in other ways of thinking about things. And for those of you who have followed me for a while, I'm all about personal responsibility. His name is Yoko. What's his name? He's a famous guy. He did a TED Talk. He has a podcast, but he talks about extreme ownership. Taking responsibility for your own actions, understanding that you're ignorant, understanding that you've made mistakes, understanding that you aren't as smart or as good as you think you are, that there's probably a good reason that you're here. And whether it's natural causes or because you've been down, you've been murdered, or that the Hermeticist will believe that if you're a bad person, you get de-leveled almost. So let's say, like, if you're a human and you're a really bad person, you get like turned into a dog. Basically, I don't know if that's true or not. But it seems to make some sort of sense. But you always have some knowledge of the state that you were in before. But I don't know how much more I could dig into this. I don't want to get people bored and have them run off. This is probably one of the longer videos I've ever done. But so going back to Odin setting you free. Those of us in the mystery school have all put our heads through a noose. That is something that's one of the first things that happen. And it's a symbol that comes back to us over and over and over again. And so the noose and the death on the tree becomes much like Christians, actually, much like Christianity. The death symbol becomes a life symbol. And that's one of the things that is kind of cool about Christianity. And if you are familiar with the mystery school traditions, you understand why that is. Death symbol becomes a life symbol. There's a saying, well, it's a key: see the end from the beginning. And we've talked about this before, but the assumption, and this is my last point before we close, I think, the assumption is that you're born, you live, you die. But the truth is, the true order that is, you die, you're born, you live. The key, see the end from the beginning, really what it's one of the many meanings for that is that death and life all happen at the same point. Death and birth, the end and the beginning, happen at the same place. So at the same time, this earth, this place, this plane you're in, is the underworld, but the earth is also a mother. The earth is also the thing that gives birth to you. The hanging from the tree is the thing that must happen in order for you to first get wisdom. It's the first thing that has to happen before you get to be set free. You can't go anywhere until you first have died. And that is a really weird concept for a lot of our traditional way of thinking to really wrap our heads around. But so it's almost like people say, if there's a God, why is there so much suffering? Why is there so much struggle? Why is there all this pain and agony and shit that we have to endure? If there's a loving God, why would he let all that happen? And I would suggest, because of all that suffering is proof that God does love us. Because no self-respecting parent would ever just keep their kids from having to struggle through things. Right? My son will fall and I'll make him pull himself up, and then I'll give him a hug and comfort him. Right? But he needs to pick himself up first. He needs to have that self-resilience. He needs to learn to problem solve things for himself and not let me swoop in and save him from his conflict. And by enduring all these things, we become stronger spirits. We ascend to higher heights. We learn more things. We become better people. When we learn from our mistakes, we grow. And so heaven isn't some far away place that will happen someday at some point. You're getting to it now. You're achieving heaven now. You're achieving Asgard now. It's just, it's a process. It's not a linear thing. It's that torus-shaped field. And when you understand that cyclical bundle that is time and that is ascension and that is all those components all kind of pulled together, it all starts to kind of, the reasons for things all kind of start to make a lot more sense. At least it does for me. And I'm sorry this is such a long video. I apologize. For those of you listening on the podcast, I'm sorry it's such a long podcast, but this is the first thing that needs to be known. And I think it was important before we continue with anything. I needed to go back over this and hammer it home. You live in the underworld. This is the land of the dead. This is all the dead beings all live here. And you can't know any of the mysteries without knowing this first. And it's unfortunate that that's the case. And it's unfortunate that this has been kept from you and it's been hidden from you and no one's ever told it to you. And I'm really sorry that that has happened. But now that you've heard it, now you have something you can do about it. You could decide to run with it and take it into yourself and grow, or you could decide it's all bullshit. And either way is fine with me. It's no skin off my back what you do. I really want to see you free. That's why I do this. This is why I sit down and do all this. This is why I sit here and talk about all of this stuff. Because I don't have to do this. But it's important shit. It's important stuff. It's important to have these things mowing around in your brain. Because the universe, and I can speak from experience, is bigger and is much weirder than you think. The truth is a weird thing. And everything here is backwards and upside down, and it's complicated, right? I want to say before we go, I want to say a very special thank you to my friend Jason. He donated some money to help us get the podcast up and running again. I was using a free version, but apparently there's only 5 hours available on the free version. And he agreed to donate money to help us get the podcast up and running, so we're no longer bound by a lot of those things. So I want to say a special thank you to Jason. Brother, you're amazing. And I want to say thank you to Kelly Monahan as well for not only providing the fairy myths, which I haven't put up yet. This is migraine season for me. Fall and spring are really bad for migraines, so I haven't been able to be as active on the website as I would like, but she has also donated some stuff. Some money to help us grow. If that is something you're interested in, there is a link down below. All right. And I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.